Stop! What just happened in Norway could redefine global security, and almost no one is talking about it. Hello, everyone. Norwegian authorities continue to stress that the United States is Norway's most important ally. But do the German Chancellor and the Canadian Prime Minister still believe the U.S. can be trusted when it comes to security in the North? That exact question was raised at a NATO press conference during a massive military exercise involving 30,000 troops from 14 nations. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney stood alongside the leaders of Germany and Norway, and his response delivered a message the entire world, including Washington, will be watching closely. Because this wasn't just another NATO press conference, it revealed something much bigger. Canada is stepping forward as a major security power in the Arctic. And in doing so, Carney made it clear that the future of Arctic security may depend less on the United States and more on a coalition of democratic middle powers working together. At a time when Donald Trump continues to threaten alliances, question NATO, and even flirt with territorial ambitions in the Arctic, Canada is building something different. A new network of partners, a new defense strategy, and a new role on the global stage. The setting made it even more powerful. Norway, one of NATO's most important Arctic countries, hosting a massive military exercise known as Cold Response. More than 30,000 soldiers from 14 nations, training for one purpose: defending the high north. Standing with European leaders, Carney emphasized something increasingly critical in today's geopolitical climate: the strength of alliances. Not just alliances built on power, but on shared democratic values. And in a world where those alliances are being tested like never before, that message carried enormous weight. We are like-minded, Carney said. We hold basic values constantly dear, but we also recognize the value of our strength. We are investing heavily in defense and security, and we are much stronger together. Stronger when we cooperate in space, in defense, and with other like-minded nations. But the real focus wasn't just NATO cooperation. It was the Arctic. The Arctic is no longer a distant frozen frontier. It has become one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. Beneath the ice lie vast reserves of critical minerals, energy resources, and future shipping. Routes that could reshape global trade and geopolitics for decades. That reality has already triggered intense competition. Russia is expanding its military infrastructure across the Arctic. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing heavily in northern shipping, routes, and resource projects. And the United States under Donald Trump shocked allies by openly discussing acquiring Greenland and its massive mineral wealth. For Arctic nations, this revealed a far more serious shift, a new geopolitical reality where even long-standing alliances could be tested by resource competition. That is why Carney's message mattered. Instead of reacting defensively, Canada is moving first, investing tens of billions into Arctic defense and infrastructure, expanding its military presence, and transforming the Arctic from a neglected frontier into a fully defended and economically connected region. While some leaders talk about taking territory, Carney is making sure Canada controls its own. We made a commitment to fundamentally change our defense strategy, Carney said. To be present 365 days a year on land, sea, and air in a territory that is 40% of our landmass and 75% of our coastline, he added. We announced over $40 billion in investments in Arctic defense, security, and economic security. But the most revealing moment came when reporters asked the question many NATO allies have quietly been thinking: can the United States still be fully trusted on Arctic security? For decades, Canada and the U.S. have worked side by side through NORAD. Their militaries are deeply integrated. Their intelligence systems operate together. The Arctic was seen as a shared responsibility. But that assumption has changed. Trump has repeatedly attacked NATO allies, questioned defense partnerships, and suggested territorial ambitions like acquiring Greenland. That rhetoric has created real uncertainty. Carney didn't reject the U.S. alliance, but he made something else very clear. Canada will no longer assume someone else will defend the Arctic. Canada will defend it, alongside partners who share its values, including Norway, Germany, and other NATO allies. It's a subtle but powerful shift. While Trump has spent years undermining alliances, Carney is strengthening them, expanding Canada's Arctic presence and building a coalition of democratic nations ready to defend the region together. When pressed again on whether the U.S. can be trusted, Carney answered carefully, "Yes," he said, then paused. He reaffirmed NORAD as a deeply integrated system that has worked for decades. But then came the pivot. Canada is taking more control and more responsibility for the defense of our Arctic, he said. We will do that through very large investments and in partnership with our closest allies, including Norway and Germany. He expanded further to include Nordic and Baltic countries, emphasizing broader partnerships that strengthen collective security. The message was unmistakable. Canada values the U.S. alliance, but it is no longer waiting for Washington to lead. Canada is building its own capacity, its own partnerships, and its own Arctic strategy. This is part of a larger global shift, the rise of middle power coalitions. Countries like Canada, Germany, and Norway working together to defend democratic systems in critical regions, not against the U.S., but increasingly independent of it when necessary. A Canadian analyst later summarized the situation clearly. These moves are about asserting sovereignty in the Arctic, not just against Russia and China, but also amid concerns about U.S. intentions. The reference to being Greenlanded was direct, a response to Trump's repeated suggestions about acquiring Greenland. For Canada, which borders Greenland and holds vast Arctic resources, the implication is serious. If the U.S. can talk about taking territory from a NATO ally, what does that mean for Canada? Carney didn't need to answer directly. His actions already did. The $40 billion investment, the year-round military presence, the expanded alliances. All send one message: Canada will defend its territory. Canada will control its resources. Canada will act with or without American cooperation. The scale is massive. 40% of Canada's landmass is Arctic, 75% of its coastline. A 3,000-kilometer border with the European Union through Greenland. This is not peripheral. It is central to Canada's sovereignty. For years, Canada relied on the U.S. to help defend the region. Those assumptions are gone. The ice is melting. Competition is rising. And Canada is stepping up. This investment isn't just military. It's infrastructure. Ports, airstrips, surveillance, and communications. It's about building real presence across a region larger than most countries. And sending a clear signal: Canada is here. Canada will stay. Canada will not be pushed aside. European allies responded immediately, backing Canada as a key Arctic partner. Cooperation across NATO, especially with Nordic and Baltic countries, is deepening. This is the new Arctic equation. Not just Canada and the U.S., but Canada, Norway, Germany, and a broader democratic coalition. And the message to Washington is clear. The U.S. is welcome, but no longer essential. What happened in Norway was more than a press conference. It was a signal. Canada is stepping into a larger global role. Europe sees Canada as a key partner, and global security may increasingly depend on networks of democracies, not a single superpower. Carney's moves carry major implications. First, Canada is no longer relying solely on the U.S. for Arctic defense. Second, it is integrating with European security systems. Third, it is maintaining U.S. ties while reducing dependence. Fourth, it is redefining the Arctic as a transatlantic space. Fifth, it delivered this message on a global stage during a massive NATO exercise. The contrast is clear. While Trump talks about buying Greenland and questions NATO, Carney is investing billions in building coalitions. While Trump threatens alliances, Carney strengthens them. While Trump isolates, Carney connects. The question, can the U.S. still be trusted, is now being asked across NATO. Carney's answer was careful, but the direction is clear. Canada is preparing for a future where American reliability cannot be assumed. That is the new reality. What happened in Norway will be studied for years. Carney didn't just speak, he outlined a new vision. Canada leads, allies partner. The U.S. participates, but is no longer the center. Canada is no longer waiting, no longer assuming, no longer dependent. It is acting, and the world was watching.
अस्सलामुअलैकुम दोस्तों, जो है कि आपको हमारी वीडियो अच्छी लगी हो तो जो है कि हमारी वीडियो को लाइक कर दें और हमारे चैनल को भी लाजमी से सब्सक्राइब कर दें और दोस्तों जो है ना कि आपको ऐसे वीडियो चाहिए तो हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब कर दें और जो है ना कि बेल के आइकन को प्रेस करके ऑल पे सिलेक्ट कर लें ताकि ऐसे मज़ीद वीडियोस आपके पास पहुंचते रहें। तो चलिए दोस्तों जो है ना कि मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में। तो आपने हमारे चैनल को लाजमी से सब्सक्राइब कर देना है और हमारी वीडियो को भी लाइक कर देना है। तो अल्लाह हाफिज़ दोस्तों, अगली वीडियो में मिलते हैं।